Hey friends, hope you're doing well. I got my coffee. Hope things are treating you well this morning. I have a fun thing to talk about. I want to know, what is the loudest concert that you have ever been to? We'll just start off by me asking you the question. You can tell me down below. What's the loudest concert you've ever been to? I was thinking about this. I was trying to think of what the loudest one I've been to is, and I have a pretty good choice. But man, right when I sat down here and I turned on the camera, I just thought of an article that I read in the late 80s, early 90s. I think it was like a Mix magazine or Tape Op or something like that. It was somebody who was this, I think he might have been a sound engineer for Hank Jr. And the article was talking about how at that time, Hank Williams Jr.'s PA was the second loudest PA in the world. They wanted to have like a very, very loud PA, which is really weird thinking of country music, but I realize there's that whole rocking part of whatever it is that he does. And the part that I thought was the most interesting, so he had the second loudest PA, which I never saw him back then. I don't know if you guys did. I had a friend that played with him back then, but for a really short stretch. But was it loud? Did it seem like a loud show back then? But when he had the second loudest PA of anybody touring, the loudest PA was Jimmy Swaggart. So when he was touring around doing his, whatever his thing is that he would do in arenas, which is kind of amazing, he had the loudest PA in the world, where he's a pure showman. You know, I'm saying that I'm being very kind when I say that, but I mean, he's kind of a carnival barker about what he'd do, and would realize the power of speaking quietly with people, and then when he really get on it, you know, to make a big point and say something really loud, it would go through your whole body and you would feel it, and it would emphasize the fact that maybe you were having a religious experience, and maybe it was loud enough to open up wallets also. But I don't know. I thought that was really interesting. I'm going to Google as soon as I get off here, and I'm guessing some of you are Googling that right now to find where that article was, because it's just somewhere way back in my brain right now. But the loudest concert that I've ever been to, I've thought about it, and I think the loudest one that I can remember was I saw the Ramones. I think it was 1988, and it was in like a small theater type club here in Indianapolis. I've talked about it before at the Vogue, and they were just so damn loud. I mean, really, really, really loud. And I think the loudest concerts I remember going to was like the smaller clubs. So maybe the PAs and all of that weren't as powerful, but there's something about when you have in such a small area, you know. So I realize the big arena PAs were huge and powerful, but there's some space for all of that sound to go. And I don't remember the arena shows being nearly as loud as the small clubs or small theaters, you know, or large clubs even. But that Ramones show, my memory of it, now PA's cabinets, like the mains, the speaker cabinets, it seems like they used to be a lot bigger, and they're smaller now. They make those cabinets a lot smaller, but you know, they're louder. They're more compact, but they're just louder now. The technology's made that possible. But I remember they had all of these cabinets stacked up for the PA on the side of the stage, like the band's playing in the middle. So on this side, as far as you could push it, there were just really tall, 12 feet, 15 feet of speakers, high and wide, probably wider than that, on each side. And I remember it's kind of a rowdy crowd, people dancing, and, you know, wasn't full on mosh pit, but, you know, it was that kind of thing, and people would try to get on stage. So there was there was someone from the club, a bouncer or somebody, standing in front of a speaker stack on each side. So their back is literally up against these mains that all of that noise, music, whatever, all that sound's coming out of. It's a foot behind their head. And I just remember being 20, 25 feet out from that, and it was just really, really uncomfortable. It was so loud. And I'd move around, and kind of do this a little bit. And I remember the guy on my side of the stage, while the Ramones were playing, it's frickin' Ramones, which is great, but it was just so damn loud. The guy was doing this while he's doing his job. The guy's probably making $3.50 an hour. And to this day, I don't know who it was. I may have become friends with him later because I knew all of those people throughout the 90s that worked there. I don't know who was working that night and if they still worked there, and I met him later. But the guy was just like this on the stage, and you could tell he was, going through hell. I'd have told somebody to kiss my ass and walked off by then. But I don't know if you remember this, but it was probably the year 2000 or so before I'd see them in venues, at least here in the Midwest. It had to have been 2000. The little foamy, smash them up and put them in there. Late 90s at least, when I remember those showing up. And so what we used to do is we'd take just a little bar napkin, a little square paper bar napkin you'd sit your drink on, and just tear it up and stick it in your ears. Or you go in the bathroom and get toilet paper and stick it in your ears. And that's what I did that night. I had the napkin stuck in my ears, and I remember kind of like fighting my way up to that guy who was working there, and just kind of held up this bar napkin for him and went like this, and he tore them up and put them in his ears, and gave me one of those. And that's kind of my biggest memory of seeing the Ramones that night. I think it was the loudest show that I ever paid to get into that I can remember, or at concerts. Now there's times when just band practice, I remember being really loud. I had some old Marshall amps with like 810 cabinets. I had 3 810 cabinets and like 100-watt head. They were the old late 60s, early 70s 4-input Marshalls. And I just plugged straight in and turned them up. And I had myself convinced that I was like doing something that Bob Dylan would do, but God only knows what I was thinking. But you plug it straight in, and it's just so loud, and it wasn't really distorted at all. It was actually really clean. When you think of like the first couple AC/DC records, it sounded like that, just plugging straight in and then turning up a Marshall, and it's not very distorted. But it sounded great. And there's just something about when you stand in front of a couple of those amps and hit an A chord, and the sustain wasn't really big, but the notes would bloom into this feedback, and it just was great. Just stupidity. And I'm sure I lost some hearing from that, just doing that in a garage, or in a basement somewhere. And the loudest things that I can remember is like being around drummers who would just play too loud. I mean, if you stand next to a drummer who plays too loud, it's just a miserable experience. And when you're young, every drummer plays too loud. You don't realize that there are people who play a little bit quieter, and their drums sound way bigger and fuller, and they sound like what somebody thinks they're sounding like when they're beating the hell out of their drums. But there's like these China cymbals. Anybody who's ever been in a band with somebody that, if you see like a China cymbal on stage, I just immediately want to walk outside and leave the club thinking there's nothing here for me. And when I become dictator, after we all begin hugging and trying to spread love throughout the world, I'm gonna confiscate every China cymbal and melt them down and make something worthwhile. But anyway, I also remember myths about, that's the problem with like playing loud. There's the mythology of it being like some great thing, some really cool thing. And I think that was born at the end of the 60s, or like Blue Cheer. I think Blue Cheer was the first, the American band that had Marshalls, and Marshalls were British amplifiers. But when they brought them over, I think Blue Cheer was kind of famous for being extremely loud. So it became this mythology, like it's a good thing, which it's not. It's not a good thing at all, but we would treat it like it was. And I remember being in school, and there was rumors that you would hear about bands. Remember back when kids talked about, you know, bands and musicians and stuff? Rock, I guess they probably still do. But the one I remember is Geddy Lee, like back when Rush was still a guitar band. The rumor that you hear, Geddy Lee had the Rickenbacker bass when he was still playing that, and all of these SVT cabinets and SVT heads, which sound freaking great, just Ampeg, big. He'd have across the back of the stage, you know, just all of these. And I'm sure in reality there were probably two of them that were actually working and functional, and the rest of them were all dummies and were there for looks, you know, but we liked it as kids, you know. But the rumor that I always heard was that Geddy Lee at sound check turned them all those SVTs up all the way, and then hit a low E string, just an open E on his bass, and it knocked down the first 6 rows of chairs in the arena. And like all the other kids would be like, "Oh wow, man, that's cool." It's part of the mythology of all that. You guys remember any of those kind of rumors about, or any mythologies about loud bands or whatever? I think the second loudest thing I can remember seeing as far as a band would be Motorhead, and they were just painfully loud, you know, painfully loud. And I think Motorhead held the world's record at one time for the, I got mosquitoes flying all around me this morning on the porch, sorry. I believe Motorhead had was in Guinness Book of World's Record for a show in Cleveland where the ceiling was starting to fall down, like some of the plaster was shaking loose and falling on the crowd. And or maybe that's just another Geddy Lee myth for all I know. But I did a little bit of reading, just a little bit. I was curious about where some of this started, and I read something. This sounds like mythology to me, but I'm going to throw it out there for fun. Supposedly Dylan, when he went electric at Newport, you know, we started playing electric, and he's playing with the Hawks. He wanted, you know, play loud, like at the beginning of that recording. He wanted the loudest PA in the world for his tour. So he hired someone out to piece him together a PA, because the PAs that he'd been playing through in theaters wouldn't be loud enough for what he wanted to do with a band. So he would bring his own PA, and that's supposedly a turning point when things got a lot louder in rock and roll. I don't know if that's true or not. I just read that and thought that was interesting. There's so much mythology around Dylan, I don't know whether that's true. But The Who, or actually Deep Purple, was the first one in Guinness Book of World Record for being really super loud. And I don't remember where that concert was, but it was actually in Guinness. And then a couple years later, The Who broke that record. And I love The Who. I can't imagine the hearing loss, you know, like them being surprised by the hearing loss. It's terrible that Townsend and Daltrey have to deal with that, but man, just all of those loud amps on stage for that long, and playing through treble boosters into those British amplifiers, the high watts and stuff, that'll just roast your hearing. I have hearing loss that I did. It's not unpleasant. This is me being serious here. I'm gonna joke about it, but I'm being serious. It's not unpleasant to me. I'm really lucky. When I'm in a really super quiet room, I hear what sounds to me like a field of crickets all the time. and it's kind of in the distance. It's not loud and overpowering, but it's always there. But it always sounds like a field of crickets, and it's not unpleasant. But I'm lucky with that. But yeah, if I'm alone in a room, I used to think that there were just crickets everywhere because I grew up in Indiana, and there's crickets. You kind of hear them now, unless that's my hearing loss kicking in. But there's always that around in my childhood, so it was kind of normal when I started noticing that when I'm in a hotel room in England, you know. But now the joke, this is me joking here, is hearing loss is no laughing matter, and I just now realized this would be the perfect segue for some kind of a commercial or sponsored video or something, but for earbuds or something, but earplugs. But I don't have that, so I'm not going to do that. But missed opportunity there. But anyway, it's better that we don't do things like that for now, I guess. But what was I going to say? Oh, I always say to Amy. Amy hears everything. She has really, really great hearing, and she can hear somebody say something about 5 houses down, you know, when they're inside with the windows closed. She can just hear things, and it's not always a good thing because she'll hear every little noise, every little annoyance or whatever. And I joke, you know, we need to get out the amplifiers and crank them up around you. And you know, I don't hear anything. And I'm a believer. This is where my joke comes in. I say I'm a believer in better living through hearing loss. You know, I don't hear anything, and it's just a nice, peaceful existence. And she'll laugh when I say that, but you know, we haven't gotten out the amplifiers yet. Can you see the bugs flying all around me? I've really got the mosquitoes and such all over me today. But also another loud show I saw in 1985. I was a teenager, and I went to an all-ages club because I heard there was a band called Wasp who was like Alice Cooper. I was told they had an Alice Cooper-like show. So I went to see it. It was like $5 or something. And the headliner was a band I'd never heard. I'd never heard Wasp. It was kind of like, it wasn't everything I thought it was going to be, but the headliner was a band called Metallica. And we're talking about 1985 in a club that holds maybe 100 kids that were under 21, you know, 17, 19 years old, somewhere in there. And it's the first time I ever heard that kind of music was live, was Metallica playing Ride the Lightning tour. And it's not my thing, never been a Metallica like fan, but it was amazing to have never heard music like that and witness it in such an intimate environment the first time you ever heard it. It was quite a physical thing. It was a force of nature in a lot of ways, and I'm really glad I got to experience it. It was pretty amazing. And then Cliff Burton died maybe 6 months later, you know, so it was 1985. It just seems like a long time ago, which it was. But years later, Metallica did a secret show at the Basement in Nashville, which is probably 10, 12 years ago. They were playing Bonnaroo. Was it Bonnaroo, which is some festival out in Tennessee somewhere in the middle of nowhere. And they wanted to play a secret show, and they contacted Grimy way ahead of time and said, we want to play there. And the Basement's really small, man. It holds like 100 at the most, maybe 80 people. Just a really small club, and it actually happened, where they said if the word gets out, we won't do it, we'll cancel it, but we want it to be a surprise, and they did it. And I'm bringing this up because Metallica, back when I saw them, seemed really loud. They weren't one of the loudest bands I'd ever seen, but just because of what they were doing, it just seemed so loud and aggressive, and I think it was loud. But Grimy said their stage volume when they played there, he said once, and then he walked it back before, but he's like, they were the quietest band that had ever played at the Basement, which is saying something because Nashville is known for extremely quiet stage volumes. You know, people playing in the clubs, people just are not loud. They just do not play loud. And then Grimy walked it back, and he's like, well, no, you know, they weren't like that quiet, but they were not loud at all. They fit in with everything else there. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And then also I want to say on the loud gigs, this is a different kind of loud gig. I saw the Jim Rose Circus Sideshow sometime in the 90s. Seemed like it was early 90s. They were playing on the Lollapalooza tour. I didn't see that, but I think they were doing like a side stage thing, and they really kind of blew up with that. And it's just kind of an old school sideshow freak show where Jim Rose was just a great MC, like a great carnival barker, and he could just deliver the whole thing so well, you know, as the guy who stands there with a microphone and talks you through the whole thing. He was so good at it, and I'm sure he's still out there doing this, but he would go on and on about, like, somebody would be lifting bricks with a piercing in their body in some place where piercings should not be lifting things, you know, bricks, we'll say, and he would be there real quiet, like, beautiful Torture King. The person lifting would be named Torture King, and beautiful Torture King, and he was really entertaining and good. You would laugh. But the PA, it wasn't audibly loud. It was loud in the sense that he had like a lot of overhead, so when he was very dynamic and spoke very quietly through most of it, and you could hear him plainly. But when he really got on it, it just kind of like, it was like Jimmy Swaggart, where it came over you and you felt it, and it was very effective. And he had some kind of a synthesizer music going on underneath all of this that felt kind of like, it wasn't Phantom of the Opera, but it was some modern version of, you know, eerie music. And there were these sub-frequencies going on that were really, really, really low, and you couldn't so much hear them, but you would feel that bass resonating through you as a constant, you know, changing tones very slowly and fluidly, and you would feel your stomach. You know, it would make you feel weird in your torso. It was just a strange feeling, and it was intentional, and it was through the power of this loud PA and a very well put together show. And there's a part of the show, some of you have seen this. I'm going to tell you guys right now that this is probably a good place for some of you to just turn this off and go pet the dog and smell the flowers and, you know, think about the good things in life. But there's a part of the show, I'm not gonna get too graphic, but I'll get a little bit graphic. There's a part of the show where they bring out a guy, I believe he was the Enigma, and he had little puzzle pieces tattooed all over his entire body, and they would stick a stomach pump, like a hose would go through his nose down into his stomach, and then there's a great big, it looked like a big mixer, just a big canister that was clear, that at the top have a plunger of some sort that you'd pull out like a lid, and they poured things in, like they poured buttermilk in, and they take a thing of ketchup, and then mustard, and I'm trying to think of all of the things that just did not go together. Chocolate. All of these weird things that just, you know, well thought out, and everybody, oh, and he's like, oh, let's put in a little bit of, you know, here's where we put the ketchup in, and people, and then followed by the chocolate and all that stuff. So it's all in there, and he kind of takes something and he stirs it up in this thing. You can see it all being stirred up, and then he takes a plunger, and there's a long hose coming out of the bottom of this clear canister, and it goes up, and it goes right into this guy's nose. And he takes the plunger, and he's slowly pushing it down pushing it down. You can see fluids going through the clear hose up into his nose. And this whole thing, which was not small, I want to say it seemed like it was a gallon, but it's probably a half gallon, something like that. It just seemed large. And he put it all down, and this music is going on where it's, and your stomach's kind of, and then he gets it all to where this thing is empty, and he says, well, what comes up, or what goes down must come up. So he pulls the plunger, and he starts reversing it, and it pulls all of it up out from his nose, from his stomach, back into this container. I'm really sorry that you guys are going on this ride with me. I apologize. And as it comes back into the container, it's a different color than when it went in, where it's actually mixed with his stomach fluids and stuff. It's not a magic trick. It actually happened, and you're kind of thinking, this is probably magic or something. It probably didn't happen. And he starts slowly pulling this, is walking away and pulling this hose from a distance as he's way over here. See if I could. He's way over here, and the hose is coming out of his nose. It finally flies out, and then it starts doing this thing like a hose, a high pressure hose that a fireman would have that gets loose. And all of these fluids are just spraying out of the end of this as it slithers across the stage. And then just a few seconds after it starts doing that, you smell this wave of bile. You can smell the guy's stomach fluids, and everybody there just starts, and it's part of the PA and the low frequencies and all of that. And then the absolute worst part is he gets champagne glasses out, pours some of that into glasses, and has audience members come up and drink it. And they did. And I went home. It's like, this is enough for me. No, thank you. There are people that I didn't know closely, but I knew from around town, that it still haunts me 25 years later. If I see them walking around, I'm like, man, oh man, you drank out of that champagne glass at the Jim Rose show. And, I'd never say it out loud. I guess I just did. I still love them, but man, I watch them closely, watching what they're up to. I think I had some kind of glitch where my camera turned off, and I'm not sure where it turned off, but I just want to say thank you guys for being here. I opened up these channel memberships a few days ago, and a lot of you guys joined, and I really appreciate it. Somewhere under this video, there's right underneath it says join, and there's a button that says join somewhere. And you can click on that and see what that's all about. It's a way for you to support this channel. And a lot of you have been supporting through Patreon, but there'll be videos that are special for those. There won't be any less videos on the main channel. I'll just add some more private ones for people if you care about that. And just check that out. And I'll also pin the top comment. You can see that there. But I'm going to show an interview right here, a video that I did with Grimy talking about when Metallica came to the basement. You guys need to see that. So click on that here, and I'll see you somewhere down the road. Much love to you guys. And wear your earplugs.